Tonight we'll drift into a world long past. A world where sandals slapped stone streets, where olive oil flowed like water, and where, if we're honest, you probably wouldn't last a single day. Go ahead and dim your lights, settle beneath your favourite blanket. Maybe fluff your pillow just the way you like it. Let the soft hum of history carry you, and the flickering fireplace of your imagination warm the air around you. If this calm journey helps you unwind, only if it feels right, consider tapping like or subscribing. But don't worry about that now, just breathe in and let go. Let's time travel gently, back to the ancient world, where the Empire never slept. Let me tell you something odd. You wake up barefoot, sore and confused. It's around 6 a.m. in ancient Rome, and your bed is a straw mattress. If you're lucky. If you're not, it's just a few blankets over cold, uneven stone. Already a soft breeze drifts through a wooden shutter that doesn't close quite right. The sun is still stretching over the rooftops, and the smell? It's not ideal. Now, here's your first problem. There's no coffee, no morning toast, no shower, and certainly no scroll through the phone kind of quiet. Instead, you get the scent of boiled lentils, stale bread, and the very faint, let's say rustic, aroma of the communal latrine just 2 doors down. You slip on your tunic. It's itchy, scratchy, really. Woven from wool, probably washed once a week, if ever. And then you remember, today is your day to fetch water. Down you go, through a winding alley past haggling merchants and stray dogs with patchy fur. You're holding a ceramic jug, hoping it won't crack. Because if it does, you'll have to explain that to someone's very stern grandmother who doesn't believe in second chances. You reach the fountain, public, of course, and it's crowded. A teenager is rinsing grapes, someone's pouring wine into a clay cup at 7 a.m, and a goat unbothered just chewed the hem of your tunic. You blink. This is your life now. Back home, breakfast is simple. A flat cake made of spelt flour and maybe a smear of honey if the bees have been kind. Romans didn't really do breakfast the way we think of it. The first meal of the day was more of a snack, called the intaculum, and it was small, just enough to keep you moving until midday. Still hungry? Tough. No cereal, no bacon, no eggs unless you're in the upper class. And even then, they might be pickled. What's next? Labour, if you're poor. Ledgers and scheming, if you're rich. Or maybe a strange combination of both if you're a merchant. But here's the kicker. Most of your day is spent dodging heat, managing expectations, and trying not to get fined for stepping out of line. You walk through the forum and it's loud, really loud. The sound of sandals slapping pavement, the clamour of bronze coins in pouches, philosophers arguing about the nature of the cosmos while a man shouts about fresh fish. The air is thick with voices, Latin, Greek, even whispers of Egyptian here and there. Let's pause for a moment. Can you hear the hum of it all? The chatter of politics, of barter, of daily survival? And here you are, fresh from the 21st century, craving an oat milk latte and maybe some deodorant. Lunch comes around, maybe a small bowl of olives, cheese, dried figs, or a bit of leftover porridge. You chew slowly. Everything's salted. Everything. It's the only way to keep it from going bad. There are no refrigerators here. Just hope. As the sun dips, you're invited, if you're lucky, to a modestina, the main meal. Stewed lentils, boiled cabbage, maybe some chickpeas. If you know a guy, maybe even a bit of salted fish. Now, if you're elite, you'll eat lying down, elbow resting on a cushion, fingers stained with sauce and honey. But for the rest of us, we sit on stone benches listening to gossip and trying to avoid biting into the occasional pebble baked into the bread. Yes, that happened. Stone ground wheat wasn't just a charming phrase, it was literal. You might be wondering, did they have dessert? Kind of. If you count date-stuffed pastries or honey-soaked donuts fried in olive oil. Sweet, sticky, and frankly, the closest thing they had to a churro. Let's linger here a bit longer. Picture this. The golden flicker of oil lamps, laughter in the background, the faint crackle of firewood warming the room. Outside, the city grows quieter. A night breeze stirs the linen curtains. Somewhere, someone's playing a flute. It's almost peaceful, until a neighbour starts yelling about something lost or stolen. Paper-thin walls, some things never change. As the night deepens, you lie back, full, tired, aware that the chamber pot is only a few feet away, and you'll probably need it before dawn. and you think, how did anyone survive this? But they did. With grit, with garlic, with generosity, and just enough wine to forget the hard parts. So now, let your mind wander. Because as we leave that warm tavern of Roman memory, we'll soon arrive at another table, set with flavours you might never expect. Now let me take you somewhere quieter, still in Rome, but tucked behind marble pillars and woven silk curtains. The air is cooler here, scented faintly with myrrh and overripe figs. It's late. So late that most torches have burned out and even the house slaves have curled into their corners. But in one wing of the Domus Augustana, the emperor is awake. Not every emperor, of course. Just imagine one, slightly restless. Maybe Claudius, known for his odd hours and heavier appetite. He shifts under his fine linen robe, then gives a low sigh. Sleep isn't coming. And so, with the subtle creak of a polished wooden door, he summons a servant. Not for war, not for state matters, for food, a midnight snack. Now, before your mind drifts to cheese puffs or cold pizza, pause. This is Rome. Late-night cravings meant something different. Think, roasted dormice. Yes, dormice. Tiny, plump rodents, delicately stuffed with minced pork, herbs, pine nuts and honey, crisped over low coals and served in little ceramic dishes. Sounds a bit like a Roman version of meat-stuffed marshmallows, just with a tail. And they were a delicacy, a nobleman's luxury. You didn't eat dormice unless you were someone, or serving someone. The kitchen hums softly, a low murmur of knives against wooden boards. A few cooks wipe their hands on linen cloths, stir pots of lentil mash thickened with vinegar and bits of sausage. There's wine, of course. Always wine, watered down for practicality, spiced for flair, warmed slightly over coals because the emperor's digestion is delicate. The tray is assembled in silence. A few slices of garum-glazed eel, a cluster of pickled onions, some fried pastry twists sticky with dates, maybe even a wedge of goat's cheese wrapped in fig leaves. As the tray makes its quiet journey to the private chamber, let's pause. Can you hear it? The soft slap of leather sandals, the crackle of a small fire, the faint chime of a silver spoon against ceramic. Somewhere, an owl hoots. The palace breathes around itself. The emperor, now reclined, accepts the tray with only a nod. He selects a pastry, bites, chews. Let me ask you, can you imagine being a royal insomniac in a world with no lamps, no white noise, no podcasts, just the dark, and the occasional stuffed rodent? He eats in thoughtful silence. Then, as the fire dims and his stomach settles, he reaches for a papyrus scroll. Maybe a dull one, tax codes, or a weather report from Alexandria. Something just boring enough to lull him into sleep. You wonder, was this routine? Did emperors eat in the moonlight often, or only on troubled nights? Were these snacks comfort, or ritual? And did they ever dream of simpler food? Because while dormice and honeyed eels sound extravagant, sometimes all a Roman really wanted was a slice of bread dipped in olive oil. Simple, warm, familiar. Even emperors craved plainness now and then. We drift now from the velvet-draped bedchamber. The emperor exhales, sleep comes, the tray is removed, the fire fades, and as his breath slows, so too shall ours. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your thoughts soft. Because next, we journey not to the palace, but to a Roman alley, where a different kind of food waits for us. Let's drift out of the palace now, slip past the marble columns, past the shaded courtyards with their decorative fountains, and wander through Rome's early morning streets. The sun is barely up, just a pink smear across the tiled rooftops. You can hear the muffled clatter of carts, the distant bray of a donkey, and a low hum from somewhere near the base of the aqueducts. That's where we're going. Follow me down the winding path where the cobblestones are slick with dew, where the walls are covered in fading red paint and gossip carved with knives. We're headed to the Thermopolium, the ancient Roman food stall. It's not glamorous, not in the way the palace was, but it's alive, warm, and in its own way, oddly comforting. A broad, shallow counter juts out into the alley, built of stone and decorated with little mosaics. Simple ones, chickens, grapes, a smiling dolphin for no reason at all, and set into the counter are big sunken jars, dolia, each one filled with something bubbling or steeping. It smells amazing. Savoury steam rises into the air, thick with garlic, vinegar, meat and old wood smoke. Someone's frying sausages in olive oil, and the fat sizzles with a kind of ancient music. Beside it, a pot of lentils simmers, brown and hearty, with maybe a little cumin and fish sauce stirred in. Yes, fish sauce. Garum, the Roman ketchup. You might wrinkle your nose, but oh, don't be too quick to judge. It's salty, rich, a little funky, like anchovies melted into liquid umami. They poured it on everything, everything. Now picture this. A labourer, dust still on his arms, tosses a few coins onto the counter. The shopkeeper, wiping his hands on his tunic, hands over a small clay bowl of hot stew. No forks, just a chunk of bread to scoop it. The man dips it, blows on it and takes a bite. He sighs. And right there, in that moment, he's not thinking about the empire, not about the Senate, not about Caesar's latest decree. Just this stew and this moment, that's all. Another customer walks up. A young boy, maybe 12, carrying a sack of olives on his shoulder. He gets a flatbread with cheese and herbs pressed into it, like a proto-pizza. A portable meal, still steaming, folded in half and handed over with a nod. You might ask, was this safe? Was it clean? Let's be honest. Not always. There were no health codes, no gloves, but people ate here every day. And somehow the rhythm of the street, the sound of boiling pots and the nearness of others made it feel okay. It was fast food, but also familiar food. Let me pause you here. Let's breathe it in. The smell of baked wheat, the soft thud of feet on stone, the clink of clay bowls being stacked, the tiny hiss of steam when a ladle dips into something thick and bubbling. Hungry? You wouldn't be the only one. Now for a brief moment, imagine trying to order here. You, in your modern hoodie, holding up 2 fingers, trying to mime vegetarian. The cook stares. You point again. He hands you a skewer of something roasted. Probably chicken, possibly lizard. You smile, you bite. It tastes surprisingly good. That's the charm of street food under the aqueducts. It's not predictable, but it's filling, fast and full of flavour passed down for centuries. The cook's grandmother made this stew, so did hers, and hers before her. And now it's yours, just for a moment. Let's leave this little alley now. The bowls are empty, the bread is gone, the sun is climbing higher. Shadows shift under your feet. We'll walk slowly, past the stalls selling honey cakes, past the men shouting about sardines, past a quiet dog curled up under a table. As we round the corner, another story begins. Let your mind stay warm with the smell of breakfast stew, and prepare to wander next, not through Rome, but through the sands of its forgotten province. The breeze feels different here. It's dry, soft, almost weightless, like silk slipping across sun-warmed skin. We're no longer in the city of Rome. We've wandered far, following the faded edge of the empire to a province that gleams under desert light. Roman Egypt. The air smells of date palms and dust. And from somewhere nearby, the slow beat of a drum echoes, steady as a heartbeat. We're standing in the courtyard of a desert villa near Alexandria. The walls are high to block the sun. Inside there's a fountain gurgling lazily, its trickle competing with the rustle of papyrus reeds swaying just outside. And here, tonight, a banquet is being prepared. But not a Roman one, not really. No togas, no statues, no marble floors. This is a fusion, a meeting of 2 worlds, where Roman officials try to stomach Egyptian spices, and Egyptian hosts try not to laugh too loudly when they do. Let's sit quietly in the corner, there, beneath the lattice shade. We'll just listen for a while. The cook is humming to herself. She's grinding coriander seeds with a stone mortar. The scent is sharp, citrusy. A bowl nearby holds goat meat marinated in honey, beer and onion, a recipe borrowed from the ancient scribes, handed down through temple kitchens and camel caravans. It's going to be slow roasted, then wrapped in palm leaves and steamed in a clay oven dug into the ground. Rustic, beautiful, little smoky. The host, a Roman tax collector with an uneven tan and suspiciously expensive sandals, has no idea what he's in for. Servants move with quiet grace. One carries a tray of pickled lotus root, another slices cucumbers into thin, perfect rounds to be served with yogurt and mint. Someone opens a jar of fermented fish paste, and here we are again. Fish paste. It seems no corner of the empire escapes the reach of salty condiments. The first course is simple. Barley flatbreads drizzled with honey and sprinkled with crushed dates and sesame seeds. The crust is crackly, the inside still warm. You bite into it and the sweetness hits slowly, like a memory. Then comes the soup, but not the kind you'd expect. This one is chilled, made with lentils, garlic, and a puree of roasted eggplant. It's spooned into small ceramic bowls and topped with a swirl of olive oil that gleams gold in the firelight. Someone sneezes. The pepper here is no joke. The Roman tax collector takes a sip. He makes a face, but then another. Maybe not so bad after all. Now, as you watch the stars bloom above the courtyard, silent, ancient, unchanged, you feel it. The strange closeness of a meal that blends two cultures. One empire, one desert. Two histories, folding gently into a single dish. You hear laughter now, soft and low. One of the Egyptian hosts is telling a story about crocodile eggs being mistaken for river stones. Someone chokes on their wine. The main course is served with a kind of ceremony. The goat, tender and fragrant, is unwrapped in front of the guests. The smell is wild, earthy and sweet. A soft ooh moves through the group. You notice something unexpected on the table. A dessert. It's a custard. Smooth, golden, almost glowing. Made with milk, honey and ground tiger nuts. Chilled in terracotta cups and dusted with cinnamon imported through Red Sea traders who'd travelled thousands of miles to carry flavour from one continent to another. You dip your spoon in. It tastes like warmth, like bedtime, like the end of a good day. And now the fire has burned low. The guests grow sleepy. Someone plucks at a lyre. A few soft notes float through the dry air. The wind carries them away. And so shall we. Let the last taste of honey linger. The stars still blink above the Nile. And our next path, it follows the sound of boots through mud, not sand. We'll leave Egypt behind now and find our way toward Britannia, the edge of the world, where food gets a little colder. The world feels heavier here. The skies are grey, low, and always a little damp, like they've forgotten how to shine. You can almost feel the fog in your hair. This is Roman Britannia, somewhere near Londinium. The roads are slick with rain, and every breath smells faintly of wet moss, peat smoke, and something bubbling from a nearby campfire. Let's follow that scent. We pass a few soldiers, their armour dulled with mud, huddled under a half-built awning. They nod without looking. They're used to the cold, used to the endless drizzle. What they're not used to is the food. 'Cause let's be honest, Britannia was not exactly the culinary crown jewel of the empire, and yet it had its charm. Let me guide you to a small wooden hut tucked against the edge of a Roman outpost. A cooking fire glows inside, flickering orange against stone walls blackened with soot. Over the fire hangs a battered iron pot, inside cabbage, lots of it. Boiling slowly, swirling with leeks, barley, maybe a dried fish head or two. It's not glamorous, but it's hot, and in this weather, that means everything. A Roman auxiliary soldier stirs the pot with a carved wooden ladle. He sniffs, frowns, adds another pinch of salt. Well, salt if he has it. Crushed seaweed if he doesn't. He ladles some into a wooden bowl, breaks off a piece of coarse bread, and settles near the fire. It's not a feast, it's survival food. But it's warm, it clings to your ribs, and sometimes that's enough. Let's sit beside him now. Hear the quiet pop of the fire, the faint tap of rain on the thatched roof, the squish of boots outside. He offers you a taste. You dip the bread into the stew. It's earthy, sharp. The cabbage is overcooked, of course. It always is. But there's a comfort in it, like eating something your grandmother made when she wasn't feeling fancy. You glance around the hut. A few clay pots line the shelves. Dried beans, old herbs, maybe some imported peppercorns hidden away like treasure. Pepper was rare this far north. A pinch cost a fortune, but it added just enough kick to make the bland taste bearable. Now here's something curious. On the small wooden table sits a cake. Not a soft, frosted kind. This one's more like a brick, made from oats, dried berries, and a bit of animal fat. You could throw it and knock someone out, but you take a bite anyway. It's chewy, tangy, surprisingly satisfying. And suddenly you understand. You're thousands of miles from Rome. No marble here, no dormice, just cold wind, rough bread and stew that's seen better days. But there's firelight and shelter and a kind of camaraderie in the clink of wooden bowls and the steam rising into the rafters. You ask the soldier what he misses most about home. He shrugs. The olives, he says. Then he smiles. But cabbage is not so bad once you stop caring. That's Roman humour for you. Outside, the fog thickens. The trees creak. Somewhere a horse snorts and stamps in the mist. You sip your stews slowly. Let your thoughts grow soft, because this is the edge of the empire. And yet, even here, a stew can feel like safety. Let's leave the fire now, quietly. Let the door creak shut behind us. The wind picks up, but our minds are warm. And next, we drift not to a province, but a port, where spices dance and ships sway gently in the harbour. The sea is near tonight. You can hear it, the soft push and pull of waves curling against the wooden docks of Ostia, Rome's busy harbour town. It's twilight now, and the port is quieting down. The last of the merchant ships have been tied off, their sails furled like sleeping birds. Crates groan under the weight of cargo, dried fruit, amphorae of wine, sacks of cumin and cinnamon from far, far away. The air smells rich, a little briny, a little sweet, like honey clinging to driftwood. Let's walk slowly down the worn wooden planks of the dock. Listen. Do you hear the creak of ropes, the soft slap of fishtails from a nearby basket? A cat darts across your path, fat from scraps, with half a sardine dangling from its mouth. But we're not here for fish, not tonight. Follow me down a winding alley where flickering lanterns hang above open doorways, casting golden puddles of light onto the stone. There's laughter ahead, and the scent of warm pastry. We've found a popina, kind of Roman tavern, busy but cosy. Inside, the walls are painted with faded murals. Musicians sit near the hearth playing a reed flute and hand drum. Low chatter hums like bees, and in the centre of it all, a tray of fresh-baked sweetbread still steaming. Let's sit near the hearth. The owner, a woman with flour on her elbows and a smudge of ash on her cheek, brings us a slice without asking. No introductions, just a soft smile. The bread is golden, glossy with egg wash, studded with chopped dried figs, crushed walnuts, and a drizzle of thick honey. You take a bite. It's soft, warm. It melts like sleep on the tongue. Now, here's a fun bit of history. Romans loved sweets more than most people realise, especially when it came to baked goods. One common treat was libum, a sort of cheesecake made with soft cheese, flour, and honey often offered to the household gods. Another? Placenta, not the organ, don't worry, but a layered pastry with honey and cheese that was the ancient ancestor of baklava. But what we're tasting now is simpler, more rustic, less ceremony, more comfort. In the corner, a sailor is trading cinnamon for olives. Another swears he saw a peppercorn the size of a grape. People laugh. Stories stretch longer than the truth. That's what ports are for. Half lies, whole meals, and just enough wine to believe anything is possible. Someone slides a cup of mulsum across the table, wine sweetened with honey and spices. You sip it. It warms the chest, a sleepy kind of warmth, a gentle bloom of clove and crushed myrtle. You settle deeper into your seat. Let your thoughts wander, maybe to the way the musician's fingers tap gently on the drum, or the soft flicker of the fire against the clay walls, or that second slice of sweetbread calling your name. We'll linger here for a moment longer, because even though the harbour will wake early with crates and shouting and seagulls begging for scraps, for now it rests, and so do we. Let's slip quietly out the back door, past the kitchen, past the stack of firewood, into the night air, cool and salt-sweet. Our next step takes us not to a port, but to a battlefield. Strange, I know, but even in war, people eat. The world is quieter here, but in a different way. Not peaceful, just tense. You feel it in the air, low, heavy, like a breath being held. There's no music, no tavern laughter, only the faint crunch of boots on frozen grass, the clink of armour being tightened, and somewhere in the distance a raven calling once. Then again. This is the Roman frontier. Could be Gaul, could be Dacia, could be anywhere the map bleeds red. We've arrived the night before battle, and though no one says it aloud, the camp is hungry. Let's walk slowly between the rows of tents. The fires are small, kept low to avoid drawing attention. Most soldiers sit hunched near them, sharpening blades, whispering prayers, or staring into nothing at all. One of them, his beard flecked with frost, nods to us. He's holding a small clay pot over the fire. Inside, barley porridge. Watery, bland. Just a little better than boiled gravel. This is pulse, the standard Roman military meal. Think oatmeal, if oatmeal gave up on being tasty and decided to be durable instead. Barley flour, water, maybe a bit of vinegar or oil if they're lucky. Some dried vegetables, occasionally a shred of dried meat. Is not meant to please, it's meant to last. Still, it fills the stomach, and in a moment like this, that's enough. A few soldiers chew slowly, staring at the flames like they're trying to warm memories rather than hands. One pulls out a hardened biscuit. Buxalatum. It looks like a small stone. Feels like one too. You don't bite it. You soak it in wine or stew and hope your teeth survive. Speaking of wine, here it comes now, in a goatskin bag passed from man to man, watered down of course, but spiced oddly enough, with herbs, even resin, not for taste, for preservation. But still it burns a little going down, like courage. Let's sit for a moment with them. Feel the quiet, the cold. Let the soft murmur of Latin prayers wash over us. The sound of one soldier singing softly to himself, some tune from home. His voice cracks. No one mocks him, not tonight. Across the fire, a centurion pulls out something strange, a small packet wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside, dried apples, from Hispania maybe, a luxury, a comfort food smuggled across provinces just for moments like this. He slices one thinly and passes a piece your way. It's sweet, tart, the kind of flavour that sneaks past the fog of fear and reminds you of sunshine. One soldier grins and says, "Tomorrow if I live, I want fish," another laughs. "Tomorrow if you live, you'll get more barley." The fire crackles, and silence returns. You look at the pot of porridge. It's thickening now that it's cooler. The soldier adds a handful of herbs, thyme maybe, or wild garlic. Not enough to change the taste, just enough to remind him he tried. That's what this meal is. A reminder of effort, of staying human, even when the world feels like a stone pressed against your chest. You breathe in, slow. The fire flickers on a bronze helmet nearby, casting ghostly shadows that sway like memories. And now you feel sleep creeping in, because even before battle there are dreams, and food, and flickers of warmth. Let's rise slowly now, leave them their night, their silence, their stew and courage and salted biscuits. We walk away from the fire, and into something far stranger, where food isn't just for eating, but for power, for fear, for ritual. We're going into the arena, and the menu there is not for the faint of heart. The sun is high now, too high. It beats down on white stone and red banners. The streets are hot, shimmering, filled with voices and movement. But above it all rises the Colosseum, tall, proud, and humming like a giant clay beehive. We won't step inside just yet. No. We'll circle it slowly, quietly, staying in the shadows where the marble columns stay cool. You can hear the crowd already, distant, pulsing like a heartbeat. But it's not time for blood yet. It's time for food. Because you see, for the gladiators, this day didn't begin with battle. It began with breakfast. Let's step into one of the side buildings attached to the Ludus, the gladiator training school. Inside, it's quieter. Still warm but shaded. The air smells of sweat, leather, and something sweet. Porridge. Yes, again with the porridge, but this time it's different. Thicker, creamier. Cooked with goat's milk and a handful of mashed dates, it's rich intentionally. Gladiators were fed with purpose. They needed bulk, weight, fat, not lean speed, but impact. They were known as hodori, barley men, because barley was their fuel. One sits near the open window now, spooning his meal slowly. His hands are scarred, his knuckles split, but his brow is calm, focused. Next to him, another peels a boiled egg and dips it into a bowl of salted vinegar for protein. A third munches on dried figs and little fried cheese balls dusted with herbs. These aren't snacks, they're armor. Eaten not for taste but for survival. And here's something you wouldn't expect. The night before, they may have had a small feast. Not glamorous, not soft, but ritual. Final meal, shared with others who would step into the arena tomorrow, side by side or face to face. They'd drink warm wine, maybe break bread dipped in oil. Someone would pass roasted beans or nuts. The mood, somber, not loud, like a dinner before a storm. Let's imagine that now. A dim room, a few lanterns glowing like sleepy fireflies, the scrape of a wooden chair, the smell of roasted garlic and blackened onion skins. A tray is passed around. On it, grilled sausages spiced with coriander, boiled lentils mashed into small balls and fried crisp on the edges, thick slices of bread with olives pressed into the crust. Simple, filling, dense. Someone pours the wine, they raise their cups, and no one says much, because they all know. Tomorrow the food won't matter, but tonight it's everything. Let's return now to this morning. The porridge bowl is empty. The gladiator wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He stands, breathes, rolls his shoulders, and walks toward the arena. We won't follow him, not all the way. Let's give him privacy in that final march. Instead, let's drift upward, away from the dust, to the stands, where the audience gathers with sun shields, silk fans, and snacks. Yes, even at the Colosseum there were snacks. Let's walk past vendors shouting about honeyed nuts, skewers of grilled meat, baskets of stuffed dates, and cool flasks of watered wine. One boy hands out small hand pies filled with cheese and onion. Another carries trays of salted chickpeas roasted in clay ovens until they pop. You wonder, how could people eat during all this? But they did. And somehow, in the middle of the noise and the spectacle, a woman bites into a honeyed sesame cake. A child drinks from a goat's bladder full of apple juice. A senator dips dried apple slices into spiced wine and mutters about politics. Food is strange that way. It doesn't care what surrounds it. It still comforts, still grounds. And in the Colosseum, where cheers rise and dust swirls, even fear pauses. For one more bite. Let's leave now, down a quiet corridor, away from the noise, because next, we journey home, not to a battlefield or banquet or port, but to an ordinary Roman kitchen, where pots boil, bread rises, and someone's grandmother is in charge. Come in quietly now. The door is already open, a wooden plank hung on squeaky hinges, and the warm scent drifting out tells us we've come at the right time. The kind of smell that stops you mid-step. Garlic softening in oil, wild herbs crushed between fingers, and something doughy rising in a stone oven. We've entered a Roman domus, not the grand kind with marble fountains and painted ceilings, but a modest home, lived in, soft around the edges, and in the kitchen stands a woman. You'd call her nonna if you were allowed, but this is Latin-speaking territory, so maybe a vita or mater familias. She wears a plain woolen stola, and her sandals make that gentle shuffle sound as she moves between the hearth and the counter. This kitchen is the heart of her world. The fire never quite goes out. It crackles now as she leans over a large ceramic pot, giving it one last stir. It's a bean stew, thick, pale, loaded with garlic, onion, rosemary, and just a pinch of lovage. You can hear the little bubbles breaking the surface. Pop, pop, hiss. She lifts the lid. A cloud of savoury steam greets her. She smiles faintly, like someone greeting an old friend. There's a wooden board dusted with flour. On it, a disc of dough rests under a damp cloth. She peeks at it, pats it once, then turns to the oven. With practiced hands, she adds another piece of almond wood to the flames and checks the loaf already baking inside. This is the bread her children grew up eating. The same bread her mother made. Simple mixture of ground spelt, water, and wild yeast. No sugar, no butter, just thyme. She hums a tune you don't recognize. It's ancient, soothing, the kind of melody that rises from memory rather than notes. On a nearby shelf are bundles of dried herbs tied with twine. Oregano, mint, rue. A bowl of olives so dark they're almost black sits beside a jar of preserved lemons and a handful of dried apricots. She slices one in half and eats it slowly, thoughtfully. Let's stay here for a while. Feel the warmth of the hearth, the steady rhythm of chopping, the low gurgle of stew. Outside, children shout and chase a ball down the alley, but inside, time moves slower, softer. She ladles the stew into small clay bowls, sets them on the table, cuts the bread and places it nearby. A bowl of olive oil, a pinch of salt. That's all. No fanfare, no applause, just the quiet joy of feeding someone. Now imagine you're the guest. You sit, take a bite. The stew is rich but gentle. The beans are creamy, the garlic sweet from long cooking. The bread, warm and crusty, soaks up every drop. You drizzle a little oil, tear another piece, and feel for just a moment like you've been here forever. The woman sits too. She doesn't say much. She doesn't need to. Her food speaks for her. And in that silence you realize something. This small ordinary moment is the beating heart of the empire. Not the marble halls, not the gold coins, not the battles, but this. A bowl of stew passed hand to hand. Let's linger a little longer. Watch the light shift on the clay walls. The fire flickers lower, the bowl's empty. She gathers them slowly, rinses them in rainwater, hangs the cloth to dry, and when she turns back to the stove, she's already thinking about tomorrow's soup. Let's slip out now, quietly, back into the alley where the sun is beginning to dip below the rooftops. Because next we journey to something sweeter, to the festivals, where food is not just for survival, but for celebration. The sky has deepened now, not quite night, but not afternoon either. That soft violet hour where shadows stretch long across cobblestone and the air turns syrupy with anticipation. You feel it, don't you? The streets hum, laughter bubbles from courtyards, candles flicker in doorways. Something is happening tonight, and as we turn a corner, yes, you see it. Ribbons hang from balconies, musicians tune their lyres. Even the stern old baker with flour on his elbows has cracked a grin. This is Saturnalia, the Roman festival of reversal, chaos, joy. Imagine if December and Mardi Gras and a sleepover with too much sugar had a child. This would be it. But don't worry, we're not here for the rowdy bits. We're here for dessert. Let's drift toward a small stall lit by oil lamps. The woman behind the table wears green silk and has honey on her fingers. She's slicing a cake, round, golden, and slightly uneven. That's no accident. This is libum, a sweet cheese cake made with fresh ricotta, crushed bay leaves, and drizzled with hot honey until the edges go glossy. She offers you a slice. It's warm in your hand. The texture, somewhere between a pancake and a biscuit, soft in the middle, slightly crisp where the fire kissed the crust. The honey sinks into the cracks, sticky and fragrant. One bite and it melts, lemony, creamy, ancient. Nearby, children chase one another with fig cookies. Their faces are covered in powdered sugar and they don't care. A man hands out candied pine nuts on toothpicks. Another roasts chestnuts on a grate over an open flame, popping and steaming like tiny fireworks. And oh, what's that? Over there? Pot of warm spiced wine. Well, some they call it. Red wine gently heated with honey, peppercorn, saffron, and sometimes a whisper of cinnamon. It smells like a hug in a clay cup. They're pouring it slowly, letting the steam curl into the cool night air. Take a sip. Feel it warm your chest, your limbs, your thoughts. This festival isn't just about sweets, of course. It's about laughter, masks, role reversal. For 1 week, masters serve slaves, children boss their tutors, and everyone is allowed to wear the silliest clothes they can find. A senator dances in sandals, a priest juggles oranges, someone's pet goat is wearing a laurel crown. But even in all this joy, it's the desserts that linger. Take the globuli, for instance. Little fried dough balls made of semolina and cheese, soaked in honey and sesame. They look like golden marbles and taste like history's first donut holes. Or moustache, spiced grape must cakes, baked on bay leaves perfumed with anise and fennel seed. Soft, chewy and fragrant like old books and orchard wind. One woman hands you a date stuffed with crushed almonds and pepper. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But you bite in, and it works. Sweet, savoury, mysterious. These aren't the desserts of royalty. They're the sweets of memory. Handmade, messy, passed from friend to friend. And as you sit on a stone ledge with sticky fingers and a full belly, You hear music rise again, a flute, a drum, a low chant. Lights sway in doorways, laughter carries over rooftops. For tonight all rules are suspended, and the only thing that matters is the next bite. So take another slice of labum, or a handful of nuts, or one last sip of that warm, glowing wine. Let the sweetness soften your thoughts, because tomorrow the festival ends, and we return once again to the ordinary rhythms of the Empire. But tonight, you're full, and the stars are gentle. Let's walk home now slowly. We'll pass the flickering lanterns and crumbling walls and sleep-heavy cats curled on warm stones. We'll find our way to the quiet edge of the city, where the fields begin, and where another Roman ritual's waiting, breakfast. But this time, on the farm, it's early, before the crows have stirred. Even the sun is just a whisper behind the hills, a violet glow, soft and unsure. But already this Roman farm is breathing. You hear it first, the low bleat of sheep, the creak of leather straps as a mule is hitched to a cart, the gentle sweep of a broom on stone. Then, from the kitchen, a sound you know well, a skillet warming, oil crackling, something being stirred. We're visiting a small villa rustica, a countryside farmhouse in the Roman Republic, far from the bustling cities. No amphitheatres here, no politicians, just a farmer, his family, and the land that keeps them alive. And this morning, it's keeping them well fed too. The kitchen smells earthy and familiar. A pot of pulse simmers over the coals, a simple porridge of farro, water, and a dash of salt. But this version is the farmer's wife's special recipe. She's stirred in chopped leeks, fennel seed, and a swirl of fresh goat's milk. You'd think it plain, but one bite warms you all the way to your toes. Beside it, she's frying strips of moritum, a thick garlic and cheese paste they made last night with mortar and pestle. It's been chilled, then sliced, and now it sizzles gently in olive oil, releasing waves of roasted herb and pungent delight. The smell alone could wake a statue. On the wooden table, a small wheel of cheese rests next to a clay bowl filled with olives, bitter, wrinkled, and glossy with brine. There's crusty black bread from yesterday, still good when dipped in oil or rubbed with a clove of garlic. And over on the windowsill, something sweet. Not fancy, not festival fare. Just a handful of figs, fresh from the orchard, still warm from the late summer sun. Their skin is splitting just slightly, ripe and soft and glowing purple in the morning light. You take one, tear it open. The inside is a swirl of honey and seeds, soft as velvet. You eat it slowly, juice running down your fingers, and the world feels quiet for a moment. The farmer joins us now. His hands are calloused, his tunic simple, but his grin is wide. He breaks the bread with practiced ease, dips it in the porridge and passes it around. No words, just nods. This is not a meal for conversation. It's fuel, yes, but also rhythm. Every bite has a beat, a purpose, a place in the day. The wife pours posca, a watered-down vinegar drink that's far better than it sounds. Cool, tart, refreshing. Cuts through the oil and leaves you ready to move. Outside, the oxen snort impatiently. The fields await. But inside, we stay a moment longer. Watch the sun rise fully now, bathing the kitchen in gold. See the steam curl from the pot. Hear the scrape of spoons against clay bowls. This isn't a grand Roman banquet. No silver platters, no rare spices from India, no poets reciting lines between courses. But maybe it's better. Because this is what fed the empire, quietly, every day. A porridge stirred by firelight, a fig pulled from a tree, a crust of bread soaked in oil and shared without a word. And in that stillness, sleep comes easy. As we step outside now, the air is brighter. The fields stretch in every direction. The birds have begun to sing. The farmer waves. The dog barks once. And we begin to wander again, toward the roads where soldiers travel and campfires crackle and rations are handed out by moonlight. Because next, we'll eat like a Roman soldier. The road is dusty, long, endless, rhythmic. The sound of boots on gravel echoes like a lullaby, steady and soft, like rain on old stone. You and I are travelling now, not as citizens or farmers or scholars. Tonight we're soldiers of Rome, or at least we're sharing their supper. But don't worry, We won't be doing any of the marching, just watching, listening, smelling, and eventually tasting. We've come to a castra, a Roman army camp pitched at the edge of a conquest. The tents are arranged in tidy grids, like tiny linen cities. The scent of sweat and iron lingers in the air, but beneath it, something more inviting. The smell of roasted grain and boiling lentils. A legionary sits cross-legged at a campfire. His face is lined but calm. He's stirring a pot with a stick, and beside him, stacked neatly, are the contents of his ration pack. Simple, hearty, and just enough. Let's see what's in it, shall we? First, grain. Always grain, usually wheat or barley, sometimes spelt. Issued in raw form because soldiers were expected to mill and cook it themselves. You and I might groan at the idea, but for him, routine. Next, pulse again. That humble porridge, but this time tougher. Made with whatever's available, sometimes water and salt, sometimes beans and wild herbs. When lucky, a sliver of pork fat or dried meat gets added, sizzling and bubbling until the edges go crisp. He offers you a bowl. It's thick, hearty and smoky. Not fancy, but it clings to your ribs. Beside it, he slices a piece of hardtack, a dry, almost rock-like biscuit called buxolatum. You'll want to dip it in the porridge, or the nearby wine, otherwise you might lose a tooth. Ah yes, the wine. It's called a cetum, a sharp, sour red thinned with water and vinegar. Not quite what you'd pour at a dinner party, but after 10 hours of marching under the Spanish sun or the cold skies of Germania, it's heaven in a cup. He passes you some. Warm from his satchel, slightly musty with hints of leather and plum. You sip. It burns just a little, but not unpleasantly. And then comes the real treat. From a small cloth pouch, he unwraps a handful of dates and nuts, his reward from a generous merchant or a recent raid. The dates are wrinkled and sticky, the nuts are roasted in ash. And for just a moment, as the fire crackles and the sky turns indigo above you, it almost feels like peace. A few men hum quietly near another fire. One sharpens a dagger, another plays a flute made from a reed. No one speaks loudly. They're too tired, or perhaps too full. One soldier slowly turns a strip of bacon over the flames. It sizzles and curls, leaking fat into a small pot beneath. He'll save that oil for tomorrow, or maybe he'll mix it into his barley cake for extra strength. You chew another bite of that salty porridge and look around. This is life on the march. No tables, no feast, no silver, just fire, grain, smoke, and enough to survive. But in a strange way, it's comforting. Everything has its place. Every soldier knows what to do. They cook the same meals the same way every day because when the world is uncertain, food is rhythm, and rhythm is safety. So finish your bowl, wipe your hands on your cloak, let the last notes of that reed flute drift into the night. Then lie back in the grass. The stars are ancient above you. The earth is still warm. The fire dies slowly. And you, well, you're no soldier. But tonight you ate like one. Tomorrow we'll wander back into the city. But not just any city. Next we explore what a Roman schoolchild might pack for lunch, and what they'd trade for a plum tart. The sun is higher now. You can hear it in the air, in the chirp of birds, in the shuffle of sandals, and in the laughter echoing down white stone alleyways. We're back in the heart of the empire, in a neighbourhood just off the Forum, where the streets smell faintly of fresh bread and olive wood smoke. And this time, we're not dining with senators or soldiers. We're tagging along with a Roman child. Let me show you. He's about 9 years old, draped in a slightly wrinkled tunic, his writing tablet tucked under one arm and his wax stylus poking from a belt cord. His sandals flap softly against the cobblestones as he runs down the lane, chasing the clatter of other children headed toward the ludus, their version of school. And what's that swinging in his hand? It's not a backpack. It's a small woven pouch. His prandium, midday meal, is tucked inside, the Roman equivalent of a packed lunch. And believe me, it's surprisingly charming. Let's sit in the shade of a column and take a peek, shall we? First, a wedge of panis quadratus, the iconic Roman bread with its square-cut scoring and soft crumb. Baked this morning in a communal oven, it still smells faintly of smoke and fennel. He tears off a piece and uses it to scoop up a cheese spread, a soft sheep's milk cheese whipped with herbs and a little honey. Next, olives. Always olives. Packed tightly in a clay jar with garlic and mint leaves. Salty, tangy, and strong enough to make a child screw up his face in delight and disgust all at once. Tucked beneath the bread is a small dried sausage gifted by a neighbour. Tough, spicy, with notes of coriander and pepper. He only gets a bite or two before his friend begs a trade. And then something sweet. Ah, this is where it gets exciting, because in his palm you now see a soft, sticky date cake, made by mashing dried dates with ground nuts, honey, and just a touch of sesame. It's chewy and rich like an ancient fig Newton. He breaks it in half and offers it to a girl nearby, and in return she hands him a stuffed fig, plump, split, and filled with crushed walnuts and a dusting of cinnamon. It's an edible barter system, you see. In the schoolyard, these kids swap treats like currency. A sweeter fig might cost 2 olives. A wedge of fresh cheese could land you a sliver of smoked eel from a wealthier household. And the ultimate prize, a slice of plum tart still warm from the merchant's oven. It glistens purple in the sun, and no one dares take more than one bite without sharing it first. Around them, tutors chant lessons, grammar, logic, rhetoric. But between scrolls and scribbles, the children sneak bites. Crumbs fall on wax tablets. Sticky fingers smudge the edges of scrolls. A little girl with pigtails pulls out a hard-boiled quail egg, cracks it gently on the stone wall, peels it, and dips it in vinegar and herbs. It's tart and soft. Her brother grimaces and passes her a chunk of pickled turnip instead. And all of it, every olive, every sweet date, feels like a ritual. This is how young Romans learned more than just Latin and oratory. They learned to share, to trade, to savour. The teacher calls for silence and lunch is quickly stashed. Crumbs wiped, fingers licked. The date cake is hidden beneath a stone bench for later. And you're smiling, because you've just watched the Roman Empire at its most innocent. Not conquering and not building, just snacking. So now, let's take a slow breath, brush the crumbs from our tunics and step away from the schoolyard. The sun is still warm. The streets hum with life, and ahead the air grows cooler, because next we'll descend into a bustling Roman bakery where heat clings to flour and honeyed loaves are shaped like fish, animals, and dreams. Can you hear it? The low rumble of a brick oven, the crack of crust splitting open, the muffled voices of early risers as they queue for bread at sunrise. We've arrived in the city of Pompeii just a few short years before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. But don't worry, we're not here to hurry. We've come only for the bread. Pompeii's streets are still damp with dew. The mosaic tiles under our feet sparkle faintly in the morning light. And just around the corner, past a fruit vendor peeling figs with a bronze knife, we see it. The bakery. It's small, modest, a low-slung shop nestled between a bathhouse and a wine cellar's stall. But the scent? Oh, it's magnificent. Wheat, ash, raisins, anise seed, and heat. So much heat that it fogs the glass on the shop's single window. As we step inside, the temperature rises like a cozy blanket thrown over the shoulders. You might feel your cheeks flush, just a little. Let's watch. A baker, broad-shouldered and flour-covered, is shaping rounds of panis quadratus. Yes, that distinctive Roman bread with deep scoring across the top, so it breaks into perfect wedges. Each loaf is branded with a small stamp. Not for decoration, no. It's to prove who baked it, like a signature or a business card baked right into the crust. Over in the corner, a younger girl is gently stirring a thick, syrupy mix of spelt flour, honey, and dates into clay molds shaped like birds and fish. These are dulcia domestica, sweet little cakes made with fruit and nuts, sometimes spiced, sometimes filled with soft cheese, like edible toys for the wealthier households who can afford both sweets and cymbals. And there, just out of the oven, is a tray of moustache. They're dense, chewy cakes made with grape must, the sweet juice pressed from wine grapes before it ferments. Sometimes, pine nuts are stirred in. Other times, bay leaves are pressed into the bottom for fragrance. These aren't light desserts. They're hearty, sticky, meant to last for days. Something you'd eat with one hand while carrying amphorae with the other. Now here's a curious thing. Outside the bakery is a row of millstones, great volcanic stones shaped like hourglasses, turned by donkeys or slaves. They grind the grain here on site. The flour, it's fresh, not bleached, not sifted, just coarse and golden like the sun-baked dust outside. The baker hands you a small slice of a libum, an offering cake made from soft cheese, flour and egg, glazed with honey. Sweet, yes, but not sugary in the way we know today. It's more subtle, a gentle kind of indulgence, the kind that rests softly on the tongue and fades before you know it was there. You chew slowly. Outside, children are chasing each other with fig leaves. Someone drops a coin in the gutter. A dog sleeps near the bakery door, tail twitching at dreams of sausage. There's no rush, no ash cloud yet, just the warmth of bread, the promise of sweetness, and the everyday miracles of a city that doesn't yet know it will one day be frozen in time. Let's sit here a while longer. Let the oven hum. Let the sweetness fill your thoughts. Let the world slow. And when you're ready, we'll step away gently, back into the sunlight and forward in time. Because the next meal waits deep underground, where Roman mines carved salt from stone and the labourers dined on food both humble and haunting. It's cooler here. The deeper we go, the more the world above feels like a distant memory. Sunlight? That belongs to someone else now. Up there, life flows freely, markets buzz, olive trees sway, but down here, it's different. We've entered a Roman salt mine, the kind that fed cities with flavour and soldiers with salary. The Latin word salarium, where we get the word salary, came from this very substance. Salt was gold in white powder form, and the people who mined it, they ate like men who spent their lives wrapped in shadow. You feel it now, don't you? The air is still, thick with stone and silence. It smells like metal and sweat and something earthy, like cracked pottery and old parchment. Flickering torches light the way, casting long shadows along the pick-etched walls. In a carved-out hollow, a few miners rest. Lean men with soot-darkened hands and shoulders powdered in pale dust. And between them, a cloth sack, their supper. Let's see what's inside. The first thing you notice is how little there is. No feast here, just bread, of course. Coarse and crumbly, sometimes mixed with bits of bran or chickpeas to stretch the dough. These loaves are tough, flattened, and baked to last. You could build a wall with them. One of the men dips his crust in garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans sprinkled over everything like a liquid condiment of the gods. The smell is pungent, strong, salty, tangy. It might turn your stomach at first, but after a few dips, well, you understand the appeal. Next, a small jar of olives, wrinkled, bitter, preserved in oil and herbs. They're not the plump restaurant kind you might know. These are rough, real, picked from wild groves and cured by time. They offer just enough fat to soothe a tired stomach. There's a pouch of onion slices and a few scraps of dried goat meat, chewy and smoky. One miner hands you a piece. You bite into it slowly. The texture is like jerky made by sun and fire. It's salty, sure, but here everything is. Salt is in their hands, in their breath, in their food, in their pay. Even their dessert, if you could call it that, is a hardened cake of pressed figs, mashed with crushed almonds and dusted in, you guessed it, salt. Sweet and savoury. A contradiction that somehow works, especially when eaten in the dark, when time has no meaning. You sit with them for a while. No one speaks much. A few slow grins are exchanged. One man hums an old tune under his breath, a lullaby perhaps from a childhood spent far from stone and shadow. And then the torches crackle, and it's time to return. Up, back to the air, to the warmth, to the kitchens above where noblemen dine. But something about this meal lingers, doesn't it? It's not the food, really. It's the resilience baked into every bite, the quiet endurance of those who fed an empire from beneath its feet. And their food? It may not have sparkled on marble plates, but it told a story, one of sweat and salt and survival. As you climb, feel your lungs fill with fresher air. Let your limbs stretch. Let your thoughts drift from the mind to something brighter. Because next, we'll visit a seaside villa where Roman elites nibbled exotic fish and citrus creams under moonlight. A different world entirely, but no less real. Do you feel that? The cool breeze brushing across your arms, the scent of salt water mingling with crushed herbs. We've left the earth behind now, no more tunnels or toil, and stepped into the candlelit courtyards of a Roman seaside villa. It's late. The sky above is dark velvet, scattered with stars. Somewhere water laps softly against marble steps. Torches flicker along a colonnade. You can almost hear the hum of distant conversation, voices like silk, rising and falling gently with the waves. A dinner is about to begin. This is no miner's meal, no traveller's lunch. Tonight we join a gathering of the wealthy, landowners, poets, minor senators perhaps, lounging on couches in the traditional triclinium dining posture, reclining sideways as they pluck delicacies from silver platters. Let's take a closer look. There's red mullet served whole, its skin still shimmering with hints of iridescence. A prized fish in Roman cuisine, considered luxurious, even theatrical. Some hosts reportedly chose their fish not for taste, but for the colour change it made as it died. Strange, isn't it? Like choosing a fruit for how it wilts rather than its flavour. Nearby, a slave boy pours Falernian wine, an aged vintage, sweet and fiery, diluted with snow from the mountains. That's right, snow, carried in woven baskets, packed in straw. The cooler the wine, the more impressed the guests. You sip. It's strong, earthy, the kind of drink that tastes like old secrets and new poetry. Next, a curious little plate of dormice. Yes, the rodent, but not as you might think. These were delicacies served roasted and stuffed with minced pork, herbs and pine nuts. Crisped skin, aromatic steam. One bite and you're not sure if you're horrified or delighted. It's oddly tender, like a meatball wrapped in pastry but smaller, much smaller. A server walks by with melons chilled in snow, sliced thin and drizzled with a reduction of honey and black pepper. Sweet, spicy, and somehow refreshing. The Romans didn't fear bold flavours. They layered them like music. And dessert? Tonight it's a cream made from goat's milk and citrus zest, whipped with egg and baked slowly in earthenware pots. A rustic ancestor of creme brulee, perhaps. It's soft, tangy, and just a bit smoky from the hearth fire. You run your spoon along the edge, savouring the warm, gentle bite of orange and cream. You lean back. Overhead, the stars spin slowly. A musician plucks a kithara nearby. Delicate, drifting notes. You close your eyes, and for a moment everything vanishes. The salt mines, the bakery, the city's chaos, all gone. Just food, music, and moonlight. And yet, even this decadence has an end. The laughter softens, the dishes are cleared. Guests murmur thanks to their host, slipping sandals back on and disappearing into the night. So we too will move on, but not far. Next we'll enter the quiet chambers of a Roman doctor's quarters, where food isn't for joy or show, but for healing. A place of herbs, tonics, and the strange breakfasts that medicine once believed could cure all. Shh, it's early, before the streets awaken, before vendors shout and sandals scuff the stone. You and I are already inside a modest domus nestled near the Tiber, walls lined with jars, bundles of drying herbs dangling from wooden beams, and the soft glow of olive oil lamps just beginning to stir to life. This is the home of a medicus, a Roman doctor, and today we're not here for surgery, we're here for breakfast, because in ancient Rome the line between food and medicine was as blurry as a half-full wine cup. Everything you ate either cured you or killed you, and this morning our gentle medicus believes a certain combination of tastes will restore strength to your tired bones. You're seated on a low stool, wrapped in a thin woolen shawl. There's a faint chill in the air, scented with crushed fennel and thyme. From the corner a slave girl brings a wooden tray. On it a small porridge, thick, beige and steaming. It's made from barley gruel, simmered slowly with goat's milk and a pinch of rosmarinus, rosemary. A sprig floats lazily on top. You take a spoonful. The texture is humble, creamy but with a soft graininess, like warm pudding that's spent the morning reading a philosophy scroll. Not much salt, not much sugar, but oddly comforting. It's the kind of food that doesn't ask questions. It just is. Beside it, a small plate of dates soaked in vinegar, astringent and sweet. They were believed to aid digestion, especially after restless sleep or melancholic dreams. You bite into one and feel a strange sharpness along the edges of your tongue. It clears the mind in a way coffee does for us now, only quieter. The doctor approaches. He places something in your hand, a medicinal biscuit baked from spelt flour, honey, crushed coriander seeds, and ground myrrh. Yes, myrrh. The same resin offered to gods and emperors is here, in your little round cookie. It smells of incense and ancient temples. You chew slowly. And the taste? Sweet, with a floral bitterness. Like if licorice fell asleep in a sunbeam. For hydration, a clay cup of warm water with chamomile and mint, infused overnight and served tepid, never cold. Cold water, the physician reminds you, can shock the liver. Romans believed every organ had a mood, and food kept those moods balanced. You sip. It's delicate. You can almost hear your own breathing now, the rhythm of life slowing, the body unwinding like a scroll left to dry in the sun. He offers one last treat, a teaspoon of fig paste with cumin and honey, to be eaten slowly, as though reading poetry. A curious blend, sweet, earthy, herbal, almost like jam stirred with secrets. And then he nods. Your meal is done, no fire-roasted meat, no fermented sauces or imported fish, just warmth, softness, simplicity, because in this moment, food was not meant to dazzle, it was meant to steady the soul. Outside, the city yawns awake, but in here, everything remains calm. You feel full, but more than that, you feel tended to. So now, let's rise gently from this little apothecary. We'll walk back toward the forum, but tonight, instead of nobles or labourers, we'll visit the travelling entertainers, the gladiators, actors and chariot drivers who lived loud, dangerous lives and ate to match. Let's see what they were chewing on. Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of an arena. The sun is blazing high. Dust swirls in golden halos. Somewhere, a chariot wheel creaks. Nearby, a young gladiator tightens the leather strap of his gauntlet. He's calm, focused and hungry. Not for fame, but for food. Because what he eats today might decide whether he sees tomorrow. Welcome to the diet of the Roman athlete. You might expect meat, lots of it. Steaks maybe, roasted birds, a boar's leg or two. But no, the most common fuel for these men, gladiators especially, was a surprisingly humble grain called farro, often turned into a thick, filling porridge nicknamed the barley mash. It was cheap, plentiful, and dense with carbs and minerals. Imagine a Roman protein shake, but warm and slightly sour, served in wooden bowls, scooped by hand, eaten while sitting on a stone bench under a sliver of shade. Let me walk you through their usual pre-fight meal. First, farro gruel, slow-cooked with a bit of olive oil and crushed fennel seed for flavour. The smell is earthy, like warm bread and garden herbs after rain. A handful of broad beans are sometimes tossed in for extra strength. These were known to cause a bit of bloating. But for a gladiator, that was a feature. It padded the organs, added protection. Next comes a honeyed date cake made from mashed fruit, barley flour and pine nuts. Dense, sticky and just sweet enough to calm the nerves. The kind of thing you might eat while pacing back and forth behind the arena walls, heart thumping in your chest. Then comes the drink. Not wine, but something far stranger. A vinegar-based concoction known as posca. It's tart, sour, a mix of vinegar, water and sometimes herbs. Used to hydrate, kill bacteria and keep gladiators alert. You take a sip and immediately pucker. It's like drinking salad dressing, but somehow it clears the mind, sharpens the senses, keeps the blood cool. Some accounts suggest they may have chewed on dried figs or smoked meats on occasion, especially after a win. But before the fight, it was all about energy, speed and absorption. Heavy meat slowed you down. Meanwhile, charioteers, those racing daredevils with windburnt faces and arms like braided rope, ate surprisingly similarly. They often travelled with their own provisions: flatbread, olives, dried sausage wrapped in fig leaves, and whatever fruits they could carry. There's a story of a young driver who refused to race without eating 2 boiled eggs for luck. Why? No one knows, but he won 7 races in a row. Sometimes the belly believes in ritual as much as nutrition, and when the battles ended, whether by applause or silence, these men returned to their barracks to eat once more. This time slower, together, under lantern light, speaking softly, sometimes joking, sometimes just listening to the crackle of fire as a pot of gruel thickened for the next morning. Not every meal was glorious, but every meal mattered. Theirs was a diet of survival, of function, and yet, in its own way, it had warmth too. Imagine huddling around that pot at night, the sting of vinegar still on your tongue, feeling full and strangely safe. Let's leave them there now, belts loosened, hands dusty with barley. Because from here, we turn to a very different crowd. Not the fighters, not the wealthy, but the forgotten, the street urchins, candle makers, and night guards of Rome. What did they eat while everyone else slept? We'll find out next. The sun is long gone. Rome hums differently now, quieter, softer. There's no parade of sandals slapping stones, no hawkers, no forum debates. Just the occasional bark of a dog, the rustle of a night breeze tugging a hanging cloth, and the slow creak of a tavern shutter still ajar. You and I are out late. Not to feast, not to perform, but to visit those who keep the city breathing while others sleep. The night workers, the watchmen, the candle trimmers, the mule drivers, the quiet scribes, the sewer cleaners, the women who sweep temples before the first light strikes marble, and the men who guard granaries from rats and thieves. These souls didn't dine by daylight. They snuck in meals when they could, often in corners under torchlight, next to barrels or gates or behind temples. And what did they eat? Come closer. You and I settle on a cool stone step beside a sleepy water seller named Marius. He's just finished hauling amphorae down a muddy alley. His reward? A cloth bundle unwrapped slowly like a treasure. Inside, a thin wedge of cheese, goat, soft, slightly salty, and a heel of old bread, rough but honest. He dips the bread into a small pot of olive oil, infused with garlic and crushed oregano. Simple, satisfying. You bite. The bread scratches the top of your mouth, but the oil smooths it over. The cheese crumbles just slightly on the tongue, leaving a clean, tangy echo. From his satchel, he pulls a cold-boiled egg, peeled carefully and dusted with crushed lovage leaf. Protein on the go. Easy to eat with one hand, you take half. It's humble, like the moon above, a pale oval full of quiet nourishment. There's a small pouch of salted almonds purchased from a cart vendor earlier in the day. Their crunch cuts through the silence like tiny echoes, a dry, nutty punctuation to this sleepy sentence of a meal. And then, dessert. A piece of dried pear folded in linen and warmed by body heat. Sticky, a little leathery, but when you chew, the sugars bloom. It's like tasting late summer whispered into your ear. No plates, no ceremony, just fingers, cloth, and patience. Elsewhere in the night, a temple acolyte sips a cup of hot mulled wine sweetened with honey and spiced with bay leaf. He uses it to stay awake but not alert, just gently aware, like us. There's a grain seller eating cold lentils with cumin and crushed onion from a wax-sealed pot. A young girl delivers firewood, rewarded with a small fig cake and a copper coin. These weren't banquets, they were pauses, little edible exhalations, a moment to sit, chew and feel human before dawn scattered everything again. And it makes you wonder, wouldn't we all trade a gold-plated platter for one of these quiet, shared moments? Now the wind picks up. Marius wraps his bundle. He stands, nods, and disappears into the dark. We stay behind for a moment, listening. There's something poetic in how Rome feeds her night souls, with crumbs, with comfort, with care that expects nothing in return. But as the sky begins to pale, we'll rise too, because next we visit Roman weddings, where food was rich with ritual and cakes could decide your fate. Let's find out what was served when love was on the menu. Picture this with me. The sun is warm, but not harsh. A gentle breeze stirs the ribbons tied to fig trees. Petals scatter over packed earth. Musicians, flute and lyre, begin their soft melodies. And in the heart of it all, a Roman wedding. Not just a union of people, but a merger of households, lineages, fortunes, and most importantly for us, flavours. You see, food at Roman weddings wasn't just nourishment, it was symbol. Everything served meant something. A message hidden in dough, a prayer wrapped in fig leaves, a superstition baked into spice. Let's follow a bride named Livia, shall we? She's just stepped into her new home, the ceremony complete. her veil a soft amber red, the colour of ripening grain. Her first act, she's offered a cake made of spelt, crumbled gently by her husband above her head. Not to eat, to bless. The crumbling was symbolic, tied to the oldest Roman traditions when couples were bound not by rings but by shared grain, a promise to sustain one another through lean years and lush ones alike. Now come the guests. They gather in shaded courtyards or open atriums depending on the wealth of the family. But no matter the setting, one treat is nearly always present: the libum. The libum is a ritual cheesecake, and oh, it's far from the rich, towering New York slices you might know. This version is small, fragrant, and served warm. Made from ricotta-style cheese, flour, egg, and drizzled with honey, it was usually baked over a bay leaf. The scent, savoury, floral, slightly nutty, lingers long after the bite melts away. Guests would receive little wedges of libum, passed around on wide platters, often topped with dried fruits or slivered almonds. The texture, think tender biscuit crossed with sweet custard. Not too sweet, just enough. Wine flows, of course. Not strong, heavily watered, so that no one topples too soon. Often flavoured with rose petals or cinnamon bark, the kind of drink that makes you sigh between sips. Now, here comes a tray of globi, a dessert I can only describe as deep-fried ricotta snowballs. Crisp on the outside, soft and steamy inside, and bathed in a thick honey glaze. One bite and the crunch yields to warm, creamy bliss, like a donut that fell in love with a cheesecake. And oh, the symbolism continues. Nuts, particularly walnuts and almonds, were tossed about, not eaten but thrown to crowds and children. Why? Fertility, of course. Cracked shells to welcome cracked laughter. Future lives hidden in small hard casings. Then there's must cake made from grape must and spelt flour. Dense, tangy, slightly fermented. It's not everyone's favourite, but it lingers on the table as a nod to Bacchus, the god of wine and ecstasy. Weddings, after all, danced on the edge of divine madness. The final course might surprise you. A plain boiled egg, halved and served with sea salt and dill. Why? The egg was life, a circle, a start and end. Eaten slowly, as a wish for calm beginnings. Guests nibble, toast, and lean into dusk. Children drift off under cloaks, musicians quiet, and Livia, full of honey and promise, disappears with her new husband. It's a beautiful thing how food could bless, seal, and predict. As we step away from the wedding and into the cooler evening, you might feel the faint tug of nostalgia for a time you never lived, yet somehow remember. But don't drift too far yet, because next we'll dive into the trick foods and edible pranks that delighted Roman banquets. From fake fish to meat pies that sang, it's a chapter full of surprises. Let's go. Shh. Do you hear that? A quiet gasp, a round of polite laughter, the gentle clinking of plates as curious hands lift lids from silver trays. We've stepped into a Roman banquet, but not an ordinary one. Tonight's feast is one of surprise, of edible riddles, of culinary illusions meant not only to nourish, but to delight, confuse, and amuse. Let's settle into the shadows of this lavish dining hall, pillared and perfumed, lit by 100 oil lamps flickering like stars, and observe what unfolds. The host, a minor patrician with a flair for the dramatic, has invited only his closest friends, and you, fortunate dreamer, are among them. Servants move gracefully, presenting the first course, what appears to be a tray of glistening peaches. But lift one to your mouth, and wait, it's not a fruit at all. It's a meatball, dyed with saffron, shaped and pressed into a peach mould, then dusted with a light coating of cinnamon and breadcrumbs for fuzz. Inside, minced veal, herbs, and pine nuts. Outside, deception. This was the Roman love of gastronomic theatre, a performance where every bite invited a second look. Now comes a fish, or does it? The fish arrives whole, with scales and all, garnished with fennel and lemon slices. But a quick slice through the belly reveals it's made entirely of crushed chickpeas and garlic, wrapped in seaweed, and painted with anchovy oil for shine. A vegetarian prank, served to shock a carnivore or two, and then a goose's egg. You crack it, expecting yolk. Instead, a mixture of honeyed cheese spills forth, soft, golden, and sweet. The shell was carefully drilled, drained, and refilled before being sealed and boiled gently. An edible puzzle, the kind Roman chefs like Apicius may have noted in their cookbooks. You smile, leaning back on the soft cushions. The tricks are gentle, not cruel but playful, a celebration of culinary wit. Next you're handed what looks like a scroll, tied with ribbon, placed upon a tray. It's edible. Made from flour and honey, this papyrus-like roll was dried and painted with natural dyes, then rolled around a core of candied figs. A sweet metaphor, a dessert that reads like a poem. Life, the host murmurs, is rarely what it appears. There's laughter, not too loud. The kind of warmth that flickers like the lamps above. For the final flourish, the centerpiece is unveiled. A boar's head, mouth open, with live thrushes flying out at the moment of cutting. It's more spectacle than flavour, a practice known to be favoured by Lucullus and others who held nothing back at their feasts. A combination of culinary skill, slight cruelty, and absolute theatricality. As the birds flutter toward the ceiling beams, gasps and giggles spread around the room. Some call it excess, others genius. And yet, beneath all the spectacle, there's always a quiet truth. The food is still food. The pranks may delight, but they always end with a bite of warmth, a sip of wine, a smile shared over a plate. The night stretches long, plates are cleared, guests lounge in postprandial peace. Your head feels light, not from wine, but from wonder. You didn't expect to be fooled tonight, but in being fooled you found joy. As your eyes grow heavy, let's step back from this room of edible illusions, because where we're headed next is altogether different. A chapter about food not in celebration or surprise, but in farewell. A gentle exploration of the food served at the end of life, at funerals, and to the dearly departed. It may sound somber, but in Rome even grief had a recipe. The lamps are lower now. We find ourselves walking quietly through an open courtyard. Pebbles crunch softly beneath our sandals. The stars blink above, still and eternal. And in the distance, the faint cry of an owl echoes across a distant cypress grove. Tonight's table is not loud. There is no music, no laughter, no clatter of plates being passed or goblets being raised. This meal is slower, more sacred. It is the funeral meal, the Silicernium, shared not just to mourn, but to remember. In ancient Rome, death wasn't the end of hospitality. It was a continuation of it, a final expression of warmth, of ritual, of remembrance, served not only to the living but symbolically to the departed as well. Let's sit beside a family on the 9th day after a burial. This was called the Novendialis, a formal day of mourning's end, when friends and relatives would gather, light lamps and share food both for sustenance and ceremony. The meal begins with bread soaked in wine placed gently at the family altar. This offering is for the dead, a symbolic feeding of the spirit. Beside it, a small cake of spelt, shaped simply and burned slightly at the edges, offered as well. These were called liba and often sweetened with honey. Now, the living are served. Bowls of boiled beans and lentils, seasoned with garlic and herbs, are passed around. The legumes weren't just economical, they symbolized the cycle of life, the planting and sprouting of new beginnings. You take a bite. The lentils are soft, a little peppery. There's steam rising gently from the bowl, fogging the cool night air. Someone near you sighs, perhaps from grief, perhaps from memory. The food fills the silence. Next comes a simple salad of bitter greens, endive, chicory, wild arugula, dressed lightly in vinegar and oil. The bitterness is intentional. Romans believed sorrow should be tasted, not avoided. There's a cold chicken, boiled and served with leeks, left unspiced to reflect humility. You chew slowly. The meat is tender but quiet, like an echo fading into the air. For sweetness, just a honeyed fig split and placed beside your cup. It's sticky on the fingers but deeply comforting, as if nature tried to offer one last kindness after loss. And the wine? It's watered, soft. Not for drunkenness, but for memory. A sip between each bite, a nod to the past. At the far end of the table, a bowl of ashes and flower petals sits unattended. Symbolic, of course. Part offering, part centerpiece. A reminder that beauty and grief often sit side by side. The conversation is gentle, reminiscent. You hear old stories, laughter through tears. Someone speaks of the departed's favourite dish, some sort of honey-roasted dormouse perhaps, and the table chuckles softly. Because even grief in Rome had flavour, it had aroma. It had moments like this where food gave shape to remembrance. No one leaves this table full, but they do leave warmed by ritual, by recollection, by the knowledge that even in death Romans cooked with intention. We brush the crumbs from our lap. A servant gathers the bowls, the altar candle flickers lower, barely holding on, and the family begins to rise one by one, quieter now. Let's leave too, because our next journey isn't about endings, it's about oddities, strange delicacies, the kinds of Roman dishes that made travellers pause and say, wait, they ate what? A little odd, little wild, but fascinating nonetheless. Let's take a deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Good. Now imagine walking down a cobbled alley in ancient Rome. Moonlight above, the smell of roasting meat in the air, and something peculiar drifting on the breeze. A scent you can't quite name. Earthy, pungent, curious. You've arrived at a thermopolium, a Roman street food stall, where the odd meets the edible. And tonight, we're indulging in Rome's strangest delicacies. Ready? Let's start gently, with stuffed sow's udders. Yes, really. A dish served at elite banquets, especially popular in the 1st century CE. The udder was cleaned, boiled, and then stuffed, with a blend of minced meat, herbs, and spices. It was a symbol of abundance, and perhaps indulgent curiosity. Think of it, a Roman might say, as a meat pudding with a chewy skin. Right. Next comes the flamingo tongue. Soft, pink, considered a delicacy by the elite. Historians like Pliny the Elder were appalled by such extravagance. But to the Roman gourmand, it was just another taste to chase. A whispering voice behind you adds, "It melts on the tongue like butter." You're not sure whether to believe them, or be slightly horrified. Still hungry? Here's a plate of stuffed dormice. Small rodents fattened in clay jars called glyraria. Once plump, they were skinned, gutted, stuffed with pork, herbs, and pine nuts, then roasted or boiled. They were the closest thing the Romans had to appetizer-sized roast piglets. Snackable, bite-sized, and, well, chewy. Odd? Definitely. But for wealthy hosts, these curious dishes were less about flavour and more about display. A menu was a map of one's wealth, worldliness, and ability to surprise. Speaking of surprise, would you try garum popsicles? Okay, not quite. But garum, a fermented fish sauce, was added to almost everything. Salads, meats, even fruit. Aged for months in the sun, made from anchovies, salt, and the passage of time, it was Rome's version of soy sauce, only fishier, stronger, unforgettably pungent. To modern noses, it might resemble the smell of a pear in August. To the Romans, it was liquid gold. And yes, some even paired it with melon or honeyed pears. Weird? Sure. But our modern sweet-salty combos, think pineapple pizza, aren't too far off. Now, for dessert we have something slightly more familiar, yet still a touch bizarre. Cheesecake made with bay leaves and crushed pepper. The bay added floral notes. The pepper, a surprise burst of heat. Served chilled, it was like eating a dessert that argued with you and then won. And finally, for the bravest of palates, fermented fish guts mixed with barley porridge. That's not a punchline. It was real. Possibly medicinal, possibly masochistic. Definitely Roman. You sip a little watered wine to settle the thought. The stars above seem to shimmer with shared confusion. Yet, as odd as these foods sound to us, to the ancient Romans they were stories of trade, conquest, experimentation. They weren't trying to gross anyone out. They were exploring flavour the way we explore space. One weird bite at a time. And who knows, maybe in 2,000 years someone will whisper about our cheese in a can or glow-in-the-dark candy and say, "You ate what?" History humbles us like that. So now, dreamer, let's rinse our hands, step away from the firelit stall, and make our way to the very last table of the night. One last story, one last plate, and then sleep. The stars tonight feel older than usual. Not because they've changed, but because we're seeing them from the edge of the world, the edge of an empire, the edge of memory. Somewhere far behind us, marble pillars still gleam in torchlight. Senators mumble in corridors, markets close, gladiators dream of freedom or fame, or maybe just a warm meal and dry sandals. But none of that matters now, because we've travelled far past the centre, past the cities, past the olive groves and aqueducts and well-kept roads. Tonight we're seated in a forgotten villa, half buried in vines, where the wind smells like sweet hay and distant smoke. It's quiet here. Just the soft creak of a wooden chair, the warm glow of an old brazier, and a table set for one final Roman supper. This isn't the Rome of conquest, gold or glory. This is the Rome of endings, of hushed voices and quiet gratitude, the kind of Rome that only speaks once your eyes are closed. Your bowl is set before you. It's called pulse, a humble porridge, once the staple of every Roman soldier. But tonight it's something more, simmered not in water, but in goat's milk, with a touch of honey and the faintest whisper of crushed cumin. Soft, warm, thick enough to hold a spoon upright, like comfort in edible form. A few chopped dates sink into the top, their sweetness just beginning to melt in. Across from you sits a man whose face looks carved from old stone, a veteran perhaps. His toga is frayed, his sandals dusty, but his eyes are clear, sharp, like someone who's seen snow fall on battlefields and wine spill in victory. He says nothing at first, just picks up a handful of roasted chickpeas and presses one slowly between his teeth, as if tasting a memory. Then comes the second course. Boiled leeks, still glistening, dipped in sour vinegar touched with garum. That's the fermented fish sauce Romans loved. Smells like a mistake, tastes like ancient alchemy. The vinegar cuts the sweetness of the leeks like a clean blade. It's sour, sharp, oddly refreshing. The kind of flavour that slaps your tongue, then apologises with a warm hug. There's a jug nearby too. Mulsum, young wine mixed with wildflower honey. It's more golden than red, and it carries the scent of dusk. You lift the cup, and it's heavier than expected, like it's holding more than just liquid. You sip. It's chilled from the clay, sweet like forgiveness, with a faint burn at the end. Across the firelight, the veteran finally speaks. "Ever march through the fog before sunrise?" he asks, voice low, not looking at you. All you hear are your own boots and the breathing of the man beside you. Sometimes you don't know if you're walking forward or marching into a dream. He chuckles, just barely. "We cooked stew in helmets once, onions and pork fat. Tasted like mud. Best meal I ever had." The next plate arrives like a hush. Slow roasted lamb, shredded by hand, no knife necessary, seasoned with rosemary and black pepper, rare and expensive. The fat glistens under the firelight, pooling just slightly. You tear a piece. It melts. No other word for it. It melts, like the taste was never meat, just memory. Smoky, rich, just enough salt to make your jaw hum. Beside it, cabbage braised in spiced wine. Not sweet, not sour, just deep, like something you'd eat while listening to rain. There are mushrooms too, wild, soft, cooked down in olive oil until they have nearly turned to velvet. You glance around, no one rushes, no servants fussing, no musicians, just the quiet, crackling sound of fire on damp wood. A dinner made not to impress, but to remember. Then, dessert. One fig. That's it. Perfectly ripe. Split in half, placed like an offering on glazed ceramic. Inside it glows deep ruby, seeds glistening like garnets. You take one bite. The skin is thin, soft, barely there. The inside, a whisper of sweet, a suggestion of sour and something else. Something old, like the flavour of a childhood you never lived. The veteran raises his cup again. No toast, just a nod. You raise yours too, for all the things that passed and all the things that linger. Then silence returns, not heavy but whole. You're led to a small stone guest room. The bed is simple. The wool blanket smells like lavender and smoke. There's a clay pitcher of cold water. A small oil lamp flickers on a ledge. You lie back, full, warm, still tasting fig on your tongue. The wind sighs against the shutters, like Rome itself letting go, and in that soft, silent moment, your breath slows, your dreams begin. Sleep didn't come in one wave, it crept, like candle smoke, like the hush after a long story, and yet, as morning spills gently into your small stone room, you're not greeted by the clang of soldiers or the rustle of city life. Instead, it's the sound of a broom, soft bristles sweeping across old tile, the smell of something roasting, warm bread maybe apples too. You don't open your eyes just yet. Not fully, not all at once. There's something sacred about these quiet Roman mornings. When you do rise, the clay pitcher of water is still cool. Your hands splash it across your face, and for a moment, it feels like a river from a century ago. A clean, rushing spring that once fed a mountain village. Long gone now, you dry your face on linen that's been sun-dried and folded so many times, it's practically become kindness itself. There's no rush to breakfast. You step outside into a sun-dappled courtyard. Olive trees nod lazily in the breeze. A lizard skitters across cracked stone. Somewhere, a donkey brays once, then goes quiet again. Even time, it seems, walks a little slower here. On a small stone table sits your breakfast. Panis quadratus, the round, scored loaves of Roman bread often baked in shared village ovens. This one is still warm. You tear it open with your hands, no knives here. Inside, it's dense, chewy, with a slightly sour tang from the fermented dough. It's the kind of bread that tells you someone woke early to make it. Beside it, a dish of soft cheese, probably sheep's milk, lightly salted with a swirl of herbs. You scoop it with the bread, and it spreads like morning mist on your tongue. Nothing loud, nothing rich, just quiet flavour and soft warmth. Then there's fruit, not a bowl. Just two, a pear, slightly wrinkled but golden, and a handful of mulberries so ripe they stain your fingertips purple before they ever reach your mouth. They taste like the colour of late summer. You eat slowly. You have to. The air insists, and as you finish, the old veteran returns, not in armour, but with a walking stick carved with etchings you can't quite decipher. He gestures wordlessly, and you follow him through a narrow path past the villa's edge. The grass is tall here, brushing against your ankles. Bees drift lazily between flowers. You wonder if they know they're Roman bees, if they carry history on their backs like pollen. Eventually you reach a stone bench overlooking the valley. This, he says, was once a lookout, a signal point. We'd light torches if invaders were spotted. You look down into the trees. There's no threat now, just fog, just birds. We never lit it, he adds, more to the wind than to you, not once. From a pouch at his belt, he pulls out a small wrapped bundle and unwraps it with a care that suggests it's something sacred. Here, he says, offering you a slice of dried fig cake, satura. It's dense, made of mashed dried fruits, barley, nuts and honey. You take a bite. It's chewy, earthy, not overly sweet, like energy captured in solid form. We carried this across Gaul, he says. Sometimes it was all we had. Other times we traded it with locals, once swapped it for a kiss. He grins, revealing a tooth missing on the left. You chew slowly, letting the quiet carry the flavour. Then he pulls something else from the bundle, a thin slice of botarga, cured fish roe, pressed into a hard amber slab. He shaves a curl of it onto a piece of bread. The flavour hits fast, salty, oceanic, like the ghost of a forgotten sea storm. It's not for everyone, but here, with the wind in your hair and Rome at your back, it tastes like truth. I once marched 30 miles on this stuff, he mutters. Of course I was younger. Had more knees back then. The sun rises a little higher and the bench grows warm. Lunch isn't far off, but no one's watching the sundial. Time, like garum, is something you don't measure too precisely out here. The veteran pats your shoulder once and stands. Back before dusk, he says. We'll cook something worth remembering. And he walks slowly back toward the villa. You sit a while longer, listening to birds, to bees, to that quiet hum that only ancient places seem to hold, a soundless echo of lives long past. Eventually you rise, return slowly, past fig trees, past sleeping dogs, back to the kitchen where something already simmers in a copper pot. And as the scent finds you, garlic, onions, a promise of pork, your stomach reminds you, one last Roman feast still awaits. You follow the scent. It winds through the open-air courtyard like a whispered invitation. Wood smoke and herbs. Maybe thyme. Maybe something older. Something wilder. Like lovage or rue. Grown here long before anyone mapped this land and called it Rome. The veteran is already busy when you return. He's tied a linen cloth around his waist like a makeshift apron and stands beside a bubbling pot, stirring slowly with a wooden paddle that looks like it's seen half the empire. "Pork stew," he says, "but not like the city makes it. Out here, we add walnuts and vinegar, the sharp kind that makes your tongue think twice." You sit on a low stool as he stirs. There's no rush. The fire is lazy. Everything about this place feels like it's resisting the pace of modernity. He ladles a spoonful, tastes it, grimaces. "Needs defrutum," he mutters. "Boiled grape must, thick and sweet like molasses." He uncorks a clay jar, pours it in with a long glug, then stirs again. Now it's getting somewhere. On another fire, flat cakes of spelt are grilling on a smooth stone. Libum, he calls them. Cheese bread offered to household gods, but eaten when no one's looking. They puff slightly at the edges, golden with honey and soft cheese mixed right into the dough. "You know," he says, "the emperor's cooks used to put rose petals in everything, even stew. Madness." He drops a pinch of celery seed into the pot and laughs. "No roses here. Just food that fills you and doesn't flirt with your nostrils." While it bubbles, he pours 2 cups of posca, sour wine diluted with water. It's sharp, not elegant, but clean and oddly refreshing. You sip. It hits the back of your throat with a tang, but it settles quickly. Something about it pairs perfectly with the stew's aroma, still thickening over the fire. Lunch is served in silence, not from formality, but because the food does the talking. The stew is rich but not heavy. Sweetness from the grape must, tartness from the vinegar, and that deep, savoury base that only comes from simmering meat for hours. You break off pieces of the spelt flatbread, dunking them into the sauce, letting them soak until they sag like old parchment. It's not fancy, but it might be perfect. Afterward, dessert arrives not on a tray but in a casual gesture. The veteran reaches into a woven basket and tosses you a handful of pine nuts roasted with honey. They stick to your fingers. You eat them slowly, one by one, crunchy, nutty, little sticky, little sweet, and there, with your back to the warm courtyard wall, belly full and mind quiet, it begins to rain. Not a storm, just a soft patter. Rain like fingers drumming on terracotta. The smell of wet dust rises, mixing with rosemary and charcoal. You don't move, neither does he. Rain, after all, is just another kind of silence. Later, when the clouds break and the sun peeks through, the two of you return to the edge of the property, past the vines, past the crumbling wall, to where the earth opens up into the valley. There's an oven here, a dome of stone blackened by years of smoke. He opens it slowly. Inside, ash glows like sleeping embers. "Tonight," he says, "we bake something from memory." You help him gather figs, not from a market, but from a gnarled tree that leans like an old philosopher. The fruit is purple-black, bursting with juice. You carry them in your tunic like treasure. Back at the oven, you mash them with sesame seeds, a bit of honey, and a hint of pepper, yes, pepper, into a paste. It's spread thickly on thin sheets of dough, folded over like envelopes, sealed with a bit of egg and water. Dulcia domestica, he calls them. Sweet things, domestic things. Food that doesn't try to impress, only to comfort. You slide them into the oven and sit nearby, letting the fire warm your knees. The smell escapes first. Fruit, toast, spice. He doesn't speak. Neither do you. What is there to say? That you're miles from anything familiar? That you're sharing a meal with a stranger who somehow feels like family? The pastries come out blistered and gold. The filling has thickened into something chewy, almost caramelized. You take one bite, and for a moment, Rome is gone. The empire, the politics, the wars, the marble halls and screaming senators, all gone. All that remains is this fig-filled pocket of time held between your fingers. "I only make these," he says, "for people who listen." You nod. You've done nothing but listen. And as the sun begins to lower once again, draping the villa in soft orange light, he leans back, eyes half closed. "One more meal," he whispers. "Just one more." But not yet. Not quite yet. Evening in the Roman countryside is not so much a change in light as it is a shift in sound. The breeze picks up just enough to rustle the grapevines. The birds trade places with crickets. Somewhere, far off, A cowbell chimes once and falls silent again. You can hear your own breathing now, slow, even, like the rhythm of a sleeping world. The veteran has lit a lantern. The flame inside flickers behind the stained glass, casting warm little pools of amber across the courtyard stones. You feel their warmth not just on your skin, but deep in your bones, like a memory you didn't know you had. For this final course, he prepares nothing heavy, just a simple meritum. It's not sweet, not festive, not even particularly beautiful, but in its humble mix of cheese, garlic, herbs and oil crushed into a greenish paste with a mortar and pestle, there's something ancient, something whispering across time. You spread it on thick slices of bread toasted over open flame. The tang of the cheese meets the bite of the garlic and the coolness of the crushed herbs. Parsley, maybe coriander. The olive oil brings it all together, softening the edges. He hands you a piece. Sustenance, he says, not ceremony. You take a bite. It's bold, honest, the kind of food that doesn't flatter you. It meets you, where you are. You eat in silence again, watching the shadows climb higher up the villa walls. The fire is now just embers. The posca is gone, the figs are finished, and yet somehow you feel more full than you felt in years. People think Rome was marble, he says quietly, but it was mostly wood, clay and bread. You let that linger, and then he rises. We'll walk. The night path winds beyond the fields, past an old aqueduct. It arches like the ribs of a long-dead giant, silhouetted against the stars. You hear the soft crunch of gravel beneath your sandals. Every step feels intentional, though you are not rushing towards anything. The stars tonight are impossible. Big, bright, unhurried. The kind that only appear where the world has learned to be quiet. And under that open sky, he tells you the last thing. They used to believe the dead dined with us, that if you left bread and wine out at night, your ancestors would visit. Quietly, gratefully. You nod. You understand now. This Last Supper wasn't just for you. It was for memory, for ritual, for the dead, and maybe for the version of yourself who needed to slow down long before you ever arrived here. As the villa comes back into view, lantern still glowing, the wind carries one last scent across the field. Laurel, just a trace, dry and herbal with the faintest peppery twist. It's from the bathhouse, he says, noticing your nose twitch. I left the water warm. And so, for this final indulgence, not a feast but a soak, you step into a stone pool fed by a natural spring, heated gently by coals beneath. The water welcomes you like an old friend. It smells faintly of minerals, of earth, of everything timeless. Your muscles melt, your thoughts drift. Steam curls around your face like a sleeping cat, warm and soft and unconcerned. And as you float in that bath, eyes half-lidded, you begin to feel Rome not as a place, not even as a history, but as a pulse, a rhythm, something human and slow and deeply, deeply alive. No marble statue could teach you that. Only bread and stew and figs and meritum, only twilight, only firelight, only stillness. The veteran says nothing more. You don't need him to. When you emerge from the bath, he's already inside, his shadow rocking slowly in a chair. The house smells faintly of smoke and olive oil and pine nuts. A dog sighs somewhere near the hearth. You find your bed. The linen is rough, but clean. The pillow smells like rosemary, and the silence, that Roman silence, is the best part. No battles tonight, no emperors, just this, just sleep. And so, we close the curtain on our little tour through time. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If you drifted off, let me know below. Sweet dreams, whispers good night.